Hello, world. You're listening to Eleanor Wagner's Strange and Scary World here on the Paranormal UK Radio Network, where we're always creeping it real. I'm your host, Eleanor Wagner.
Welcome, dedicated listeners. Thank you for tuning in this time and every time we meet. I so appreciate you hitting the subscribe tab, follow button, or show app on your podcast of choice. Today's guest is a host of his own podcast called The Paranormal Factor. He's a Texas resident and 20-year U.S. Air Force veteran who has visited a good many haunted sites, which inspired him to start his own paranormal podcast. Though he considers himself a skeptical believer in that he believes in the supernatural, he tries to have a healthy, helpful skepticism that looks to possible explanations. He uses his podcast platform to represent skeptic viewpoints and seek the truth. Please join me in welcoming Richard Wright. Welcome, Richard.
Hello. Hi, Eleanor. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for coming. First, I want to start off by saying thank you to you and your family for your service.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah, we're truly a service family. My wife and I met in the Air Force. She was in the Air Force as well. And 2 of our 4 sons are serving currently in the U.S. Marine Corps. So it's kind of cool.
Awesome. And Marines, my goodness.
Yeah.
How exciting. I'm sure as an interviewer, you've had your fair share of strange story encounters that make for interesting, in-depth discussions. When we were discussing topics of our own to talk about, 2 of them popped out that I connected with. Not too long ago, you had a podcast topic on black-eyed kids. I also listened to an episode similar to yours on my own Paranormal UK Radio Network and was extremely fascinated with the phenomenon. For my listeners who haven't heard of them, black-eyed children, sometimes referred to as devil's children, are an American contemporary legend of paranormal creatures that resemble children between the ages of 6 and 16 with ghostly white pale skin and black eyes. They appear in either normal or a bit old-fashioned clothes and are said to speak in a tone too mature for their age and are reportedly seen hitchhiking or begging or are encountered on doorsteps of residential homes. Does that sound like it summarizes it pretty up much?
Yeah, that sounds like black-eyed kids, all right. Yeah, and I think of those things you described, one of the things to add, a couple of things to add. First of all, they rarely show up alone. They never show up alone. They're almost always, every instance that I ran through in my research and doing that episode, they were in usually pairs, sometimes 3. They speak in very much a monotone, so there's no there's no humor for sure. Brian Bethel in the really famous case in Abilene did talk about, and other people have talked about them getting angry when they are not allowed to come in, and they always ask to come into your car, into your home. For me, I think the most terrifying possibility is to get this knock on the door late at night, and these kids are standing out there, which right away, kind of freaks people out. What are 2 kids doing on my porch here at 11 o'clock or midnight or something? And the other thing that's kind of strange, and I have no answer for why, but they always seem to knock. And there were a few cases where people made the comments, we have a Ringer doorbell that's lit up. It's so obvious. And yet they never use that. It's always knocking on the door. Maybe they do it for effect. I don't know.
Maybe. Almost like vampires. They have to be invited inside. One would wonder what happens to the individual that offers up the invitation. One of the hosts and psychics from the Discovery Channel's Ghost Hunters TV show told Brian Bethel, had he let those black-eyed kids in his car, he might not have been alive today.
And he feels that way as well.
Yeah.
He did an interview several years down the road from that experience. And he talks a little bit about the whole thing sort of blowing up. And it was right on the cusp of the internet. And his story was the one that sort of launched that. No, there are some cases that go back before him for sure. But he was the one that experience really kind of blasted this out into the world. And he talks about very clearly having a feeling that if he had let them in, that he would not have been around to tell that story.
I'm sure him being a reporter as he is was definitely a helpful platform to be able to get the word out to the public and get the followers, I guess, and other accounts from people from just listening to his personal altercation.
That's right. And he wrote an article for the paper that he was a reporter for. One of the things that I find interesting, you touched on it just now, that ability as a reporter to observe, right, and to see things quite clearly is very evident when he tells this story. You know, he noticed a lot of things, not just about them, but the time of night. He tried to think initially when he saw the eyes, the black orbs, that maybe it was the movie marquee lights playing a trick on him somehow. So it really, we had the benefit of that, of him having that reporter sensibility around observation.
Sure. That keen ability to pay special attention to detail and all that. Yes, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Weekinweird.com has an article about a woman who allowed them into her home. And since then, both she and her husband have become ill without any hopes of improving. I might add, the article said the kids' parents supposedly picked them up, and they were very tall, wearing black suits, inferring men in black, which is associated with aliens.
Sure.
Could the black-eyed children be part of an emerging trend in extraterrestrial contactee cases? Possibly.
It's possible. Another theory is that they could be human-alien hybrids. That's been discussed. And possibly the idea being that if they are, their goal is to secure people for abduction, right? The case that you brought up with the couple, that's a real rarity. There are only a few, very, very few cases where people talk about actually letting them in. And it always ends up with something bad happening. And when I say bad, it's kind of strange. It's nothing that the black-eyed kids seem to do directly, but it's all of a sudden medical condition coming into play.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And lack of energy and a negativity that comes over them and things like that. But we really don't have, thankfully, a lot of circumstances where that's the case, where people actually let them in. The overwhelming dread that comes over people who experience them prohibits them from letting them into their homes, thankfully.
What do you think the reason is they want to get inside? What do you think their purpose is?
Well, certainly not what they always state, which is we need to use your phone, we need a glass of water, I need to use your bathroom, and it's a mystery. No one really knows what it is, but it's prevalent. They never show up and do anything other than want to invade that space, to come into that house or that car. So yeah, there's some theories out there. I mentioned one about the alien abduction stuff, but it really is a mystery what that purpose is.
And for all we know, these mysterious disappearances of people here and there could warrant the possibility that they were people that let these beings in and disappeared.
It's possible. One of the things that I always go, we talked a little bit, or you did initially, about I'm a skeptical believer. It's really interesting. When I do these episodes, almost always invariably, whether we're talking about Louisiana's werewolf, the Rougarou, and somebody experiencing that, we get into these sort of situations where we can't say that it definitively did happen other than the person's experience in the eyewitness report, which is circumstantial to a certain extent, right? And yet we can't prove that it didn't either. So I always kind of look at things from the standpoint of how pervasive is it. And there are so many accounts of these black-eyed kids showing up and people having encounters that are some of those made up? Maybe they are, maybe they aren't, but it seems to be pervasive enough that it really gives me pause. So I tend to go by things like that when I do these episodes.
It's definitely terrifying. I mean, it's something deep within your soul sends that warning signal for you to stop, pause, think the situation through clearly. And I certainly wouldn't want to be in that position.
Right. And it's interesting. There's a few cases where women talk about this maternal instinct initially, right? Oh my gosh, these kids are out here and they're not dressed well for the cold, and I should bring them in and make them some hot chocolate. That maternal instinct kind of kicks in, and then something is holding them back from doing it. This something, just that gut feeling, something isn't quite right. And then, of course, there's always the big reveal, Eleanor, when they look up and they see those eyes. And from what people describe, it is absolutely horrifying.
Yeah, whatever the case may be, when the person is in their presence, they often describe an intense amount of fear and dread. They've even described being in an almost catatonic, hypnotic state when they look into their midnight eyes, which Bethel actually described as the sort of eyes one sees these days on Aliens or bargain basement vampires on late night television. Soulless orbs, like two great swaths of a starless night. That's creepy, man.
It is. It really is. It's very creepy. Even if you watch a show and you see, the vampire thing, right, with the totally black eyes, it's a creep out. But it's so difficult to truly, fully imagine opening your door and seeing that right in front of you. It's just horrible. There is one other thing that goes with this that also is really scary in my mind, and that is that numerous people report that they almost are hypnotized in a way where they find themselves reaching to let them in without even realizing they're starting to do it, and then catch themselves. And Bethel talks about that. He said that his hand started going down to open the door before he even realized that it was happening.
Wow. Well, this kind of reminds me of, I mentioned a little comparison of vampires. I remember younger watching a movie by a Stephen King book called Salem's Lot. And I remember the kid vampire being in the window. I don't know if you've ever seen it. You see this misty, foggy window, and then you see this vampire come up to the window. He looks like the little kid until he starts opening his mouth and you see his fangs. And he talks to the person behind the glass pane and sounds like him, and then hypnotizes them into opening that window. That's exactly what it sounds like.
Yeah,
and
it does.
It's terrifying, just terrifying. It's like a movie for sure.
Yeah, and what I sort of ended that episode with, because people have commented on it, but I'll be forthcoming. It was definitely an effort by me to sort of creep people out. But people have made comment on it that the more you think about it and the more you think about them, the more likely they are to show up at your door.
Oh, no. That's like Mary.
Oh, yeah, Bloody Mary. Yeah, Bloody Mary. Oh, I just said it twice. I'm not going to say it again.
Don't say it a third time. Don't say it. Power of suggestion.
Right, yes.
I also read somewhere that the majority of the sightings recently have been in England, where they've become a common occurrence. Did you ever hear anything like that?
Yes. Yeah, we mentioned it in the episode that it does seem to be spreading to other countries. And I recently picked up a book on cryptids and supernatural entities and things in Mexico, and black-eyed kids are listed. So they are seen and experienced in Mexico as well.
Oh my, interesting. Either they've been there all along and the stories are just coming out now,
That's possible.
Or it's spread, like you said.
Yeah.
Did you know that they actually made a horror film about it in 2012 called Black-Eyed Kids?
I do, but I haven't seen it. There's also a comic book. It's not one of the major comic book labels like DC or Marvel, but there's a comic book series on Black-Eyed Kids that's out that's actually pretty popular as well.
Is that fairly new?
I think it's fairly new, probably within the last 3-4 years, something like that.
Oh, okay. So we were talking about how the Black-Eyed Kids could be alien-human hybrids. So that brings us into my next topic of discussion, unidentified flying objects, because that was something that we had talked about. You had spoken specifically about one of the best documented UFO sightings in U.S. history, witnessed by a city of Socorro police officer Lonnie Zamora in the late afternoon of April 24th, 1964. Now, just to mention it to you, I've had my own personal UFO experiences, and I've written about them in my Hauntings book series, about several true accounts from other New Jerseyans in the area, because when I post things like this, people reach out to me with their stories. Oh, I want to tell you my story. I would love for you to write my story. And that's how I accumulate these stories for the chapters in my books. For the listening audience, Zamora's story goes that in the late afternoon on Friday, April 24th, 1964, he had told authorities he was pursuing a speeding car south of Socorro, New Mexico, when he heard this roar and saw a flame in the sky to the southwest, some distance away, possibly a half mile or a mile. Zamora said he discontinued speeding car pursuit and investigated the potential explosion. He first saw the object from about 150 yards and believed it to be a white car overturned or some sort of other vehicle in need of assistance. Does this sound like I'm saying it right?
Yes. Absolutely.
And he claimed to observe the object, and it was like aluminum. It was whitish against the mesa background, but not chrome, and shaped like the letter O. But what freaked me out was that he saw these beings standing beside this thing, which was really creepy.
Right. And he described them as wearing some kind of coverall, and they were, as he put it, about the size of an either small adult or large child. So not a typical sized man. And he saw, I believe it was 3 of these people. And he initially really beat feet out there because, of course, being a police officer in that area, he realized that where he saw this initial activity that caught his attention was near a dynamite shack. And so he was very afraid that something had happened out there where this dynamite shack was going to blow up or something. So he really was hauling tail to get out there to where this thing was. And as you pointed out, initially, as he kind of went over the first rise, he thought it was a car that was either standing on its trunk or standing on its hood. So obviously an accident of some type. And so now he's thinking, I need to get out here because this is an accident that people are going to need help. And as he came over a second crest is when he saw the individuals. And he said that one of them literally jumped when he saw Zamora. So they were not expecting anybody to be there. Certainly not a police car coming up over the hill. And then I think he went down around a corner or something and came back into view. He lost view of the object for just a few seconds. And as he came back up and made visual contact again, the entities or the people that were there were gone. So he assumed that they've gotten back into this craft. He realizes it's not a car at this point, and it's a craft of some kind. It's got tripod. There is steam or something coming out of it. And as he pulls up and watches, it starts to take off, starts to actually lift off the ground. And so his first concern is it's sort of flying really low, and it's heading right for the dynamite shack. So he gets behind his car because he thinks this thing is going to hit this dynamite shack, but it clears it and it continues off in the direction that it's going.
It was later reported and documented as having been witnessed in flight by 5 tourists traveling through Socorro as well.
Actually, it was seen by multiple groups of people. There were some reports of people in their homes seeing it through their window. But the thing that really validates Lonnie Zamora's testimony on this or his account is that there were two individuals driving into Socorro, and they saw this object. They described it exactly like he did, and it was flying at that point. So this is before Lonnie Zamora sees it, before it has landed. And they describe it exactly, same color, same shade. There was a red marking on it. Both they and Zamora commented on that marking. And they go into town, and one of the local filling station guys basically reported that these 2 out-of-towners come in, and they're really hyped up, excited, and they start telling him what they saw. So there is a real, there's veracity here on these eyewitness reports, and they match up really well. Not to mention the fact that Lonnie Zamora was a pillar of the community, solid member of his church, really strong performance in law enforcement, was well thought of by all of his fellow officers. So this is not somebody who was trying to make things up or be the center of attention. One of the things I point out in the episode is after this happened, he didn't want to talk about it. Lonnie Zamora does not go off and write a book about it. He doesn't go off and start touring, UFO convention. And for years, he really would refuse interviews and everything else. So it was definitely not something to try to get attention.
Right. personality didn't warrant that. He didn't want anything to do with the hype and attention.
Right. That's right.
And there is something to those other people describing exactly what it is that they saw, and it being the same thing that Zamora saw. And I say that from personal experience because my children have encountered their own experience in our backyard. And it was this very strange situation. They were night swimming with a friend and come running into the house. We saw a UFO, Mom. We saw it. Run out to the backyard. You got to see it with us. And of course, we get out there and it's not there anymore. And they're insisting we saw this. And I said, okay, well, come on back in the house and I'm going to separate the three of you in different areas of the house. That's my mind working. You know what I mean? I'm going to separate you, give you each some writing tools and paper, and each of you is going to draw exactly what you saw. Because in my head, I wanted to see what it was that they saw, and I wanted to see if they all saw the same thing. And they did. The pictures were identical. And I actually wrote about it in my first book and kept the pictures and put them in the book too, because it was that unique of an experience. So either there was something about this telepathic mind comparison, I don't know, but they each drew the same thing. And one of my kids, she was 3.5, 4 years old, I think, at the time, and the others were 8 and 9, I think. And for those age groups to draw a picture, to draw it exactly the same was very cool. Very cool.
Yeah, and that, what a great process that you put into place there. That was really good thinking on your part, that let's see what the experience is and let's see if there's a commonality.
Right.
Yeah. So one of the things that makes this case, and I'll tell you, Eleanor, I don't know why this Socorro, New Mexico case doesn't get more attention than it does. You will find it in some books, but everybody wants the big Roswell story, right? The Roswell UFO crash, supposedly crashed and supposedly had alien, dead bodies taken and things like that. Everybody talks about Roswell. There's a gazillion books out there on Roswell. This case, I'm telling you, if your listeners really want to dig into a very compelling UFO case, this is the case. This had physical evidence. Almost immediately, another highway patrolman friend of Zamora's shows up. They walk down to where the craft was. They see bushes singed and still burning. They see very, very clearly the marks in the sand of where the pod were that this thing was sitting on top of, the three-legged pods there. They see melted rock, actually melted down. So the physical evidence is really compelling on this. Yeah, they had a woman come out who was in the process of doing her PhD on geology, if I'm not mistaken. They had the University of New Mexico had her come out and take a look at things. And for her, her report was it looked very real. It didn't look like anything was staged whatsoever at the site. And then the other thing that I really like is up to this point, Dr. J. Allen Hynek, and some of your listeners may know that name, who was the scientific person on Project Blue Book.
Yes.
And there was a project even before that he worked on with the Air Force. He was very skeptical initially when he worked on Blue Book. This was one of the cases that started to change his mind. It was that compelling.
Well, we had a situation here in New Jersey at the Wanacue Dam in the 60s as well. In fact, on my episode was my interview with a retired police officer, Nick Fraschi, who was at the scene of that incident. And my interview with him was him explaining exactly what it was that he saw up at that dam and what he experienced. And he too received information from Hynek as well, because I guess at that point he was full blown into this Project Blue Book and sent all the police officers that were there that day. And I'm sure probably the people that were at the site as well, this envelope of questions. And of course, some of them he couldn't answer because it was, health wise. Did you experience anything when the object was there? Because he didn't actually see the object. He only saw the aftermath of it, but he had to fill out all of this paperwork to send back to Hynek and never heard anything back after that. He had his camera confiscated because he had taken a bunch of photos of the dam, and it was 20 inches of ice that was literally melted through from whatever this UFO was from the sky that everybody saw, from this beam of light that melted the ice as it shone down on it. And he took these pictures because there was no floating ice in the water. It was a smooth egg-shaped hole in the dam.
Wow.
And crazy. But he had his contact with Hynek because of the situation. The military was there within an hour, I think it was. They had it might have been from the local military here in, I can't remember the name, I can't think of it off the top of my head, but we know how we have facilities nearby in every state, and this was one closest to. So they went right out there, and of course there were hundreds of people at the time coming out of their homes because they had seen it and wanted to come and investigate it closer, I guess. Very interesting.
Right.
But it's a shame that there isn't a book that has been written about Zamora's case. I know he passed away at 76 in 2009, but who's to say that the young woman that came from the college, she might still be alive and be a good interview for a book on the subject.
Yep, I agree. And there may be other people. It's just one of those cases that really, when you dig into it, it really sticks with you. And it, as I said, I use the word a lot, but it is compelling. You have everything from the witnesses to the physical evidence and the strangeness, too. The shape is not your typical saucer shape. It's almost a oval egg shape, and it's got writing on the side in red. What is that about? So it's really something. And when we talk about UFOs in general, I've had people ask me, well, do you believe in UFOs? And what I tell them is there's not a question about believing in UFOs or not believing. They exist. There are UFOs, unidentified flying object in the sky. There's no disputing that. Now, if you want to get into the question of are they alien or not, well,
exactly.
Okay. Now you're getting into a realm where nothing has been proven. You could say that they are, and you could say that they aren't. And both sides would be equally right at this point. But to say anything other than UFOs exist seems kind of silly to me.
Yeah.
And, look, we know if you get into this subject matter in depth, you'll find statistics, and statistics are that by a long shot, most sightings are explainable. They're Venus, and I'll tell you, people laugh at that, but I've seen the planet Venus in the sky due to atmospheric conditions where I actually thought it was an airplane or something. The light was that large and bright. But, weather phenomenon, all sorts of things, right, that can be misidentified. But there's still that percentage that cannot be explained.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure some people might argue that this might even be our own military doing some new experimenting or testing on new equipment.
Yeah, I mean, that's entirely possible, right? I mean, if you took let's say, for example, the stealth bomb, a really bizarre shape to that aircraft, not like any conventional aircraft up to its time. Now, if you weren't used to something like that and you saw that out in the desert flying, what would you think? I mean, I think I would probably be looking at that and going, wow, a UFO, or maybe even a flying saucer. I mean, what is that? Never seen anything like that. There's no aircraft that looks like that. Well, yeah, there is. We just don't know about it, right?
Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know if you've been asked this question before or not, but you're a U.S. Air Force veteran. Mm-hmm. Have you yourself seen anything strange and unidentified while you were flying in the air?
Well, I'm not a pilot, but yes. When I was stationed at Holloman, Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico, southern New Mexico, there were several times late at night where I would see lights in the sky, and I couldn't tell you what they are. I mean, for all I know, they might have been satellites, but they were definitely lights moving. Now, I was involved with a really bizarre incident, and I'll share this with you and your listeners. This would have been in the time frame of about 1978. And Holloman was my first duty station, and I was a security policeman. In other words, I was law enforcement, so I was a cop on the base. And I'm out patrolling, and it's at night, and I want to say it was probably 9 or 10 o'clock. And I come in, and the desk sergeant is getting off of a phone call, and he's saying literally, yes, ma'am, I understand, ma'am, but I couldn't tell you what it is. Okay, thank you, ma'am. And he hangs the phone up, and he says, for crying out loud, what is going on? I've gotten like 7, 8, 9 calls now where people from the town, Alamogordo, are calling and saying that they see some strange lights out over our West Gate area, which is desert. And they're wanting to know what we're doing out here. And so the supervisor came in and he gets kind of briefed on that. Believe it or not, at that point in time, Project Blue Book had already ceased, but we still had a checklist that we could run with a 1-800 number that we could call to report something like this. And so he had him get that out. As he's doing that, the phone rings again. Now it's a member of the New Mexico State Police wanting to know what's going on. So now it gets elevated. They contact the base command. The base commander, somebody from military intelligence, and a couple of armed security guards go up in a helicopter and start to head off in the direction of where these lights are. The report, which I cannot verify, but the report was that the civilian airport had the object on radar and saw the approach of the other object, which would have been the helicopter, toward it. And as it got closer, this object literally in a blink of an eye shot across the radar screen to the other side of it, which would have been on the other side of the mountains to the east of Eleanor. So very bizarre stuff, right? And everybody was talking about it. Let's fast forward about 3 months later. I'm out on the flight line and I'm just kind of watching and observing in my security police truck. And I'm parked by a building and I don't even know what this building is. It's just a low building. And a lieutenant comes out and says, "Can I help you?" And I said, "No, I'm fine. I'm just observing the flight line." He goes, "Well, have you ever been in here?" And I said, "No, sir. I don't even know what it is." He goes, "Oh, well, this is our air traffic control. Would you like a tour?" I said, "Great." So I go in and he shows me and I see all the what we would call scope dopes, the guys working the radar scopes, and he talks about some things and this and that. And we get ready to leave and he says, "Well, do you have any questions?" I don't know, Eleanor, why it popped into my head, but I said, and this guy was jovial and friendly and everything. Very nice. I said, "Sir, about 3 months ago, when we had that situation where we had the UFO out by the West Gate and all that, what was up with that? What was going on?" And his face dropped and he looked at me and he said, "That's classified. I can't talk about that." And I said, "Okay." So that's Rich's big UFO story.
Very cool. Well, in the case of Zamora's incident, in 1966, the president of the Socorro County Chamber of Commerce, Paul Wright was his name, he proposed developing the site of Zamora's claimed UFO encounter to make it more accessible to tourists. I don't know if you heard about that, but they had put stone walkways and steps in the arroyo from the mesa top with a rock walkway circling the supposed landing site. Well, truthfully, it ended up being a few miles away from the actual site, I guess, because they felt that there was radiation on the actual site. That was their explanation for it. But they did do something so that people who would come to the area to investigate, they would be able to see this so-called site, which is not really the site, so it defeats the purpose. But
from my understanding, you can still get to that site, but it's not easily identifiable. There's no placard there or anything. I think they did put up a little UFO statue with a placard kind of commemorating, and maybe that's at that location that you talked about. I can tell you that the geologist that I spoke of earlier, when she went out, one of the things she did do was take a radiation level reading, and there was none indicated.
Huh. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
That they would use that excuse for not putting anything on the actual site.
Right.
Very interesting. So now you have this Paranormal Factor podcast.
Right.
And it sounds like you've got a lot of interesting topics that you've been covering.
Yeah, we do it every week. I do it every week. And I have a Facebook page that I'm really proud of. You can find that if you go out to Facebook and search on the Paranormal Factor podcast. Please remember to put the word podcast in, because there is another group out there called Paranormal Factor. And what I do is I put content out there Monday through Friday every single week. So Monday, I call that Monster Monday, and we highlight a monster, give you some information. Tuesday is a quiz, but guess what? You don't get the answer, Eleanor, to the quiz unless you listen to the next podcast.
Very clever, very clever.
A little hook there. So we give you a quiz. Wednesdays, we highlight a paranormal film or book. And Thursdays, we try to give some recent paranormal news. I'm a big fan of Coast to Coast AM, and they always get some good information. So a lot of the information we throw out are stories that they've done that are really interesting. And then Friday, we drop the episode every Friday, and you get the answer to the quiz. But I started it, the first broadcast or airing of the podcast was September 30th. So we had, 14, 15 episodes in the first season. We just started the second season, and I plan well ahead. So I actually, believe it or not, I have all of the topics pretty much listed for the whole year. What I do is when I come across the opportunity to do some interviews, I'll just pull one of those episodes out and throw it back down on the bottom of the list and insert the interview. But it's been a blast. I'm really having a lot of fun. And people who start podcasts and who've been doing podcasts will tell you, you have to love the subject that you're doing, because it is work. I mean, it's a lot of work to do the research, to do the recording, the production, after you do the recordings, all of that sort of stuff. And if you don't love the topic and what you're doing, I could see how it would really become something that wouldn't be a lot of fun. But I'm having a blast doing this. I just love it. And I love learning. I love learning new things. And so every time I go out and I do an episode on, say, the Rougarou, it's a chance to learn what is the Rougarou and what people are reporting that they've seen, and some of it getting into some of the Cajun culture and things like that. So it's a blast. It's a lot of fun.
What was your favorite episode so far?
I have a couple. Black Eyed Kids definitely is there. That's one of them. The Socorro incident was my first one, and I look back, and it's so true of anything that we do in life, right? When you first start out, you're never as good as you're going to be and get and improve to. So sometimes I look at that and go, well, I did it because I had such a passion for that particular UFO case. And even when I did it, I thought maybe I should hold this back until I'm a little better at doing this, because I really want to do this justice. And it's so funny because I was so nervous that I whipped through it. Hopefully the nervousness does not come through in the broadcast, but I whipped that thing out, and the episode is the shortest by far of any of my episodes. It's like 25 minutes or something. And usually now the episodes are right in the 45 to 50 minute range. So those two are there. The one I did on Ouija board stories was really good. It had some really scary, real, true stories involving the Ouija board. And we also got to get into some of the history of how did the Ouija board even come about. And the last episode of that first season was an interview I did with a local medium. And that was one of my favorites as well. It's a gentleman named Bill Kurd, and he really got into a lot of good stuff about what a medium is, how he goes into situations, what he tries to do, how mediums in real life differ from what you see on TV or movies, things like that. And that was a lot of fun to do.
Did he read you?
No.
Sometimes they do that. They go, oh, I have something to tell you. I could tell you. You have somebody standing on the right side of your shoulder there, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, he is a clairsentient and clairaudient. So he gets feelings when he goes into homes that are haunted, allegedly haunted. He gets feelings, and he will also hear. He may hear voices or whispers or things like that. And he actually does a lot of his work, believe it or not, through remote viewing. So he will have photographs of the home and places within the home, and he will use those and put himself through remote viewing in that situation. It was really fascinating stuff.
Interesting. And it was smart that he told you that mediums differ very much in life from those that they put on TV, because as a paranormal investigator, I can say the same for paranormal investigations. I mean, the shows on television come a dime a dozen nowadays, and everyone seems to think that that is the way it is. And it's really unrealistic, because you could be on an investigation for 6 hours and have nothing happen.
Right.
And you're going to be on a show, we've got to make something happen. And they're not going to wait around for 6 hours for it to happen. And it's kind of sad, though, because people have this perception of what it is. And it really isn't like that, because when we do have something happen, we are so excited that we got footage or audio of something, because it takes so long to really get something realistic.
And you know, he validates that. He said exactly the same thing. He said, you look at these shows, and he didn't want to throw stone. You know, he was like, maybe it was time compression. Maybe they're baking stuff, but maybe it's just time compression, right? Maybe they did go out for 4 days and they just compressed everything and it looks like a 1 hour deal. But he said, I can tell you, Rich, when I go out to the location, I will go out 3, 4, 5 times to visit. And, and like you said, Eleanor, maybe nothing over those 3 or 4 days happens. And he said, sometimes we'll get something, but it's not until like literally the last day that we're there.
Right. Spirits are going to come only when they want to come, not when you want them to come. That's just the way it is. And I've been told personally from somebody who's in the industry that those shows are entertainment. That's what they're paid to do. They're paid to entertain the audience. And so you have to really take it with a grain of salt. And that's not to say that there isn't stuff that's real. I'm a paranormal investigator, and I can tell you there's stuff that's real. real. It happens. But don't believe everything you see on TV as the actual occurrence, because they're trying to entertain you.
And, that skeptical believer that we talked about, I do watch a lot of the shows, but I'm watching it really for information, not even necessarily to be entertained. And so when I see things like, paranormal caught on camera, there may be one clip out of 2 or 3 or 4 shows that seem even remotely compelling to me. I immediately start looking at, they're filming this, but I can't see the camera angle enough to know that there's nobody over there dangling something or pulling a string or doing a number of things, right?
Sure.
I mean, I'd like to give people the benefit of the doubt, but at the same time, when I look at something like that, it's like, well, come on. I just can't really go there. Or you happen to catch a Bigfoot, and isn't it quite the coincidence that you're in the right place and right time, which would be a coincidence, but you also happen to be pointing the camera at just the location that you need to be able to get this on film.
Right. You can't believe everything. Did you get a chance to see the episode that my team was on Paranormal Caught on Camera?
I have not. On my list.
I can tell you that really happened. That was real. We were doing an investigation in the Sterling Hill mines in Ogdensburg, New Jersey. And we were all taking video footage from different angles. So when this incident happened with this strange fog that was interacting with the group happened, I ended up wanting to send it into Paranormal Caught on Camera and took the best footage out of the groups that I felt was the best visual for the viewer. So I sent it in and they liked it, and they did a feature on us on one of the episodes.
Oh,
but
that's
that
awesome.
really did happen. It really did happen.
Wow. Now, I'll tell you, the way my experiences happened, I went over to Scotland several years ago, and I took a tour, and it was to the Greyfriars Cemetery, which genuinely, when you're out there walking around at 11 p.m. at night in the cold Scottish air, it is creepy. And there's something called the Mackenzie poltergeist, and there's a whole story about it that I'm not going to get into, but basically, this poltergeist has been known to scratch, bite, pull hair, etc., of people on this tour, anybody who might go on this tour. And it's serious enough that before you go to this location where it's most active, at the very end of the tour guide really says, seriously, if you're pregnant or if you have a heart condition or anything like that, I really, really strongly suggest that you wait here. And on the tour I was on, we actually had 2 or 3 people do that. So this is where my head is, right? We go into this kind of like a catacomb almost, and everybody's up to the front where the opening is. Nobody wants to go back except me. And I go back. And I go as far back to the back of this thing that I can. And I'm in the dark back there. And I literally said, okay, here I am. If you're real, this is your chance to prove it to me. Bite me, pinch me, scratch, nothing.
Have at it. Mm.
And there was nothing. So does that mean there isn't a poltergeist there? No, it just means that I didn't experience anything. That's all.
Right. You were mentioning earlier Ouija boards. I am totally against them. And if somebody asks me, what do you think of the Ouija board? Should I mess with it? I'm like, no, don't even touch it. You're messing with something you have no idea what you could be opening yourself up to. And just having seen and heard some things with my group, within the group, and from their experiences in the past with things that they've worked at, it's not something you want to mess with.
No, I agree 100%. And I hope that the episode, it's entertaining for sure, but I hope it does serve as a cautionary note to people who listen to it that this really is not something to be trifled with. It is not something to mess around with at all.
No, for sure. So you say you're on season 2 now with Paranormal Factor. That's quite an accomplishment. I know personally I wasn't going to take on an episode a week because I just don't have the time. But, my first priority is writing. That's what I'm doing. I'm writing my next book, and I'm always looking for new stories to put into chapters ahead of time. And also the paranormal investigating, that I have to find time for that too. So when I took on this task of having a podcast, it was like, I'm going to do it bi-weekly because I can safely get ahead of myself that way. I really would feel overwhelmed doing weekly. And I don't know how you or anybody does it every week because the editing is driving me nuts. It's like 6 hours for one episode. It's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work. When I first started that first week, I think I was up until 1 or 2 in the morning that Thursday night to make sure that I had everything done and I could drop the episode the next day on Friday. And I think that really was due to a couple of things. Number one, it was early. I didn't have a process yet in place, which I do now. Number two, I use a tool called Audacity, which is great for recording and doing all of your post-production stuff, layering in music, sound effects, all kinds of things. And I just didn't know the tool that well. And so it was still early in that learning phase. But now I have a process. And as soon as that episode drops on Friday, I'm like almost immediately into the research for the next episode. Mm-hmm. And all through the weekend, it's been really nice over the past few months because I watch football while I'm doing it. But it's doing all the research. It's starting to put things together. And then usually Tuesday or Mondays and Tuesdays, it's getting the writing down, adding in the more editorial type pieces that I want that might take on things. And then usually Wednesday I'm recording. And then Thursday ends up being the production, the post-production stuff. And I'm done and I'm ready to go. So the process is working really well.
And your family supportive of you in your new venture?
Oh, they love it. They can't believe that I did it. They were like, I can't believe this. And then when they listened to the first few episodes, they were like, yeah, Dad, this really sounds like a real podcast. It's like, well, I hope it does. That was the goal.
Yes, it is.
So, they've been really, really supportive and they listen to every episode. So, yeah, it's been good from that standpoint. And I try to be sensitive too, as far as just like you, there's other things that I need to do. I work full-time, I have full-time jobs. So there's always that as well.
Right.
So it's just managing the time. But again, I go back to, I love my subject and that passion really carries me through a lot of that stuff. It just doesn't seem like work.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I mean, I'm a people person. I love to talk to people. I love to have discussions. I love to learn about new things. I like to be scared. I always have. And I'm always looking for my next story. So you have to love what you're doing or else you wouldn't do it. That's exactly right. And I'm the same. I'm exactly the same way, for sure.
Yeah. And, I was really happy that you're talking about the podcast running for just 3 months in that first season. And right at the very end on the last episode, we hit 500 listens for 3 months. So I felt pretty good about that.
Yeah, it's definitely a great feeling when you look up those numbers and say, wow, people are finding me interesting. They're actually tuning in. Right. It's very exciting.
Yeah, it's validating. There has to be something going right. So that's good.
What made you have your cutoff? What was your cutoff for season 1? Like, what made you decide, okay, I've done a season 1. Is there a certain decorum as far as the number of episodes in one season, or is that just something you make up yourself? Or
yeah, I decided to go on a yearly basis. So rather than have it go from September to September, what I said was, you know what, when I get to the end of this year, that's the end of season 1, even though it's only 14 episodes. And I'll start 2022 fresh and every week. And so that will be that will be season 2. So every year will be a season. And I expect, and unless by season 3, 4, 5, I get burned out, I expect to be releasing an episode every week. So there should be 52 every year.
Very cool. Well, please tell my listeners where we can find you and any of your websites and or spots to check you out.
Thanks. Yeah. So again, if you go out, we're on all the major listening platforms. So you'll find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. There's some other ones out there that I don't use that I know we're on too, because I get the analytics that show that people are listening on them. You can listen on Facebook. I always put in the link when the episode is put out on Fridays, so you can find it there. And I use Anchor as my hosting site. So if you go out to Anchor and search for it, you can find it there. But probably the easiest one for most people is going to be Apple or Spotify. And just search on the full name, The Paranormal Factor Podcast.
Gotcha. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. This was really interesting. And I'm looking forward to listening in on your podcast as well.
Oh, thank you very much. And Eleanor, it's really been a pleasure. I appreciate you having me on. And I intend to reciprocate, my friend, because I definitely want to get into some of the paranormal investigations that you guys are doing. It just looks fascinating, and get a chance to talk about some of those books that you mentioned. So, well, thank you again. Deeply appreciate it.
Ghostly listeners, you can follow me on my website, authoreleanorwagner.com, where there are links to my books and video updates and photographs from all the Lady Ghostbuster investigations. Also, you can sign up or level up on my author Eleanor Wagner Patreon program. That's Patreon, where you will find special bonus opportunities only available to its patrons, such as one-on-ones with me and co-hosting opportunities on episodes of Eleanor Wagner's Strange and Scary World podcast. Thank you, paranormal enthusiasts, for tuning in today. I hope you'll come back again. Remember to tap into your own gifts. Everyone has them. And in the meantime, make sure you're creeping it real.